Good morning. How is everyone today? Thank you for joining us on this rainy Tuesday morning. We are very excited that you all are here to join us. My name is Olivia Haynes, and I'm the co-director of the Reuben Mark Initiative for Organizational Character and Leadership, as well as the director of the Bernstein Center for Leadership and Ethics. And on behalf of Columbia Business School and Columbia Law School, I'd like to welcome you to our Reuben Mark Organizational Leadership Series Breakfast with David Heath, co-founder and chief executive officer of Bombas, in conversation with Professor Silvia Bellezza. This series is part of the Mark Initiative for Organizational Character and Leadership, which is a joint initiative leveraging the intellectual capital of CBS and CLS to build courses and programming which imparts lifelong leadership lessons and teaches the skills and strategies necessary to create an optimal organizational culture. It was established with generous support from Mr. Reuben Mark, former chairman and chief executive officer of the Colgate-Palmolive Company. We're honored to have Mr. Mark here with us today, and I'd like you all to join me in a round of applause for his support of this initiative. The goal of the Reuben Mark Organizational Leadership Series is to host preeminent business and legal executives from various industries to highlight their effective leadership styles in congruence with their company's strong organizational cultures. Today, we are honored to host a pioneering entrepreneur who exemplifies this and more in the apparel industry. And now, without further ado, I would like to introduce our moderator. Professor Silvia Bellezza is the Gantcher Associate Professor of Business and Marketing at Columbia Business School. Her research focuses on consumer behavior and symbolic consumption, how consumers use products and brands to express who they are and signal status. Before joining CBS, she earned her doctorate in marketing at Harvard Business School and worked in the marketing departments of LVMH and Danone. We thank Professor Bellezza for joining us in this conversation. I'm going to turn it over to her now to start.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. Thank you for the kind introduction. Thank you very much for being here. It's a great pleasure. And it's very nice to see many familiar faces. Thank you very much for joining us. So what we will do is we will start with a quick video, right?
Sure.
Then I'll introduce David, and we will have a conversation, you and I, a few questions, and then we will open it to the audience.
This is the most important pair of socks in the world. Why? Because this pair of socks represents something bigger than all of us. Something that started 4 years ago. Let's back up a little, back to the beginning. I'm Randy, this is Dave, and all of this started with a quote that Dave saw on Facebook. Socks are the #1 most requested clothing item at homeless shelters. It turns out you can't donate used socks. That means there are people out there who don't have the luxury of putting on a clean pair of socks every day. How can we go from this to this? Think about that. We did a lot. We became obsessed. And what do you do when you get obsessed? You start a company. You name it Bombas after the Latin word for bumblebee. You borrow an amazing idea, thanks Blake, and promise to donate a pair for every pair you sell. But in order to donate a lot of socks, you need to sell a lot of socks. How do you sell a lot of socks? You make the most comfortable socks in the history of feet. You start by trying on a bunch of socks, then more socks, and a few more for good measure. So many socks. Now fix everything. Get rid of that annoying toe seam. Fix this, add arch support, add stay-up technology, use the best cotton and the best merino wool so they're soft as a puppy. That one. After 2 years of fixing, time to celebrate. Okay, that's enough celebrating. Back to work. Figure out what socks to donate. Reinforced seams? Check. Darker colors to show less visible wear? Check. Antimicrobial treatment? Double check. Turn your apartment into an office. Hire some smart people. Sell socks. Donate socks. Move into a real office. Hire more people. Sell more socks. Donate more socks. Okay, how about some press? Yup. Cool.
You have a deal. We'll take a deal.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Whoa. Build a community of amazing supporters. Like her, him, her, him, and even this guy.
Which is cool, because I'm famous.
Set the lofty goal of donating 1 million pairs in 10 years. Get it done in 2.5. Get a tattoo to celebrate.
No. Sure.
Film it. Share it. Wow. Back to selling socks. New socks, like these, and these, and these. Oh, those look nice. High five the design team. In the years that followed, sell millions of pairs. More importantly, donate millions of pairs. Thank your people. Thank your customers. Thanks, Zach.
Thank you. Yeah, no problem.
Tell them you couldn't do it without their support. Really mean it. Your support turned one little pair of Bombas donation socks into millions of acts of human kindness, millions of chances to give someone a little bit of comfort, and millions of opportunities to connect to the community where we all work and live. That's why this is the most important pair of socks in the world. Okay, back to work. You guys done?
Yeah.
All right, great videos. And in fact, they have a series of these videos, right? You did one for 1 million.
1 million, 5
5
million,
million,
10 million,
10 million.
and then we're working on 25 million now.
Oh, wow. So he also has a tattoo for the 1 million. They made a bat. And so the 1 million one is very fun, so you should watch it. So a couple of things about Dave. He's the co-founder and CEO of Bombas, which was launched in 2013, but you've been studying the product, right, for 2 years before then.
Yeah,
so that took a while.
I first heard the quote back in February of 2011.
Yeah.
And then, without any real manufacturing or product knowledge, went on this kind of journey to figure out how to make something.
Mm-hmm. And before then, he's a true serial entrepreneur. He has founded 3 companies with 1 successful exit and has invested and consulted in a range of startup businesses. So definitely has much experience in the startup world. So let's start with a question. This question is about the business strategy. I'm curious, what came first? More the idea of like the mission or more like the company? And how do the two?
Yeah, so I mean, I never in a million years thought that I would run or start a sock company. I don't think that's the aspirations of a lot of people in the world. But I did go to business school, and I always knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. My dad's an entrepreneur, so I was always looking for the idea, and always had my eyes open and ear to the ground. And back in February 2011, I came across a quote on Facebook that said socks were the most requested clothing item at homeless shelters. And I didn't immediately go, oh my God, there's a huge business here. I actually was just like, man, that's like pretty sad. Here's an item of clothing that I've never spent more than a few seconds a day thinking about. And here it is perceived as a luxury item for a whole group of people. And similar to that time, if you can take yourself back there, Tom's was in business for about 5 years, so still on this kind of meteoric rise and highly popularized in terms of people talking about it. And then Warby had launched about 5 months prior, so they launched in late 2010 and kind of reinvigorated this idea of this one-for-one or give-back business model movement. Where they had taken, obviously, what Tom's had done with shoes and applied it to eyewear. And then I was like, oh, well, if they did it for eyewear, maybe we can do it for socks. So it really started with the idea of giving back and kind of snowballed into what it is today.
Mm-hmm. So once you identified the category of socks, what made you think that you could disrupt it with this direct-to-consumer model?
Yeah, I mean, at first, it didn't start as a business. I started carrying around socks in my backpack and
Really?
handing them out, to people that I met along the way to and from work. But I literally from the video, it was a thought process of, okay, if we're going to donate a lot of socks and we're going to sell a lot of socks, how are we going to sell a lot? We've got to create something that really stands out in the marketplace. And so having zero apparel or manufacturing background, I think I started to approach it like a consumer. I looked down at my own 2 feet and I was like, okay, well, what are the things that I don't like about, my product, the product that I consume? And so I always hated that annoying, toe seam. I always felt like, after a few washes, it felt like cardboard, and, they were always constantly falling down. I was always pulling my socks up throughout the day. And so I went out into the marketplace and tried to understand, what the landscape looked like. And what I noticed pretty quickly was that there was two, pretty distinct categories of athletic socks. And I was working in startups at the time, so I wasn't really wearing dress socks. And the dress sock movement of funky colors and designs was kind of happening. There was Happy Socks and Paul Smith. So I never really related a lot to that product. So I wore jeans and sneakers to work every day, and so I focused on the product that I was wearing. And what I realized is that there was two distinct categories. There was kind of the mass market commoditized product, the 12 pack of Hanes that you would buy at Walmart or Costco, and then there were these really specialized individual premium products that were focused on very endemic categories like running, cycling, basketball, hiking. And here you had a product that was $1 a pair, and then you had these products that were $15, $18, $24, $36 a pair. And I was like, how can something be 360% more expensive than something else, without really trying to understand what separated those two products. And so I just started wearing a lot. And I realized that in the premium price products, there were a ton of innovations like seamless toe and arch support and comfort footbeds and use of high quality proprietary fabrics and constructions. And so I started to Frankenstein. I I got in touch with a manufacturer and I said, okay, I want the toe seam from here and I want the arch support from here. And I'd had them send me samples, and then I just started iterating on the product. Kind of back and forth with the factory, really tailoring it to kind of what I thought would be the best product.
And so do you think that it's the superiority of the product itself that is behind this success?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like business 101. I mean, you have to have a good product or service or else the markets won't consume it. I mean, the idea of obviously having a mission that gives back, the two kind of are super intertwined, but over the years, I've talked to a number of entrepreneurs that are like, I've realized there's this, opportunity to give, something to somebody else, but they're just taking like a commoditized product, or they're just slapping a new name on something that already exists. And I'm like, I really challenge you to try to create something that's better than what's in the marketplace, because I think the consumer's resilience to pay a premium just for a donation, just for a give back model, doesn't extend much beyond, they want a good product at the end of the day.
How do you measure the social impact of your actions and?
So it's an area that's ever evolving for us. As a team that started small, we had one charity partner that we relied on to distribute all of our donations out to other charity partners. Now we've got a dedicated team of 4 internally that manages relationships with over 3,000 giving partners throughout the country. And everything from small mom and pop type of local shelters to really big organizations that distribute throughout the country. We're starting to, now that the team is getting bigger, I mean, managing just 3,000 alone is a big time job, and moving millions of pairs of inventory around the country on a need base. Now we're trying to start to develop reports based on survey data that really starts to incorporate, what is the end impact that we're having in some of these local communities. We hear anecdotally, I mean, one of the stories that always, will always sit with me is we have this charity partner down in North Carolina that we've been giving socks to for the last 2.5 years. And what most people don't realize is that because you can't donate used socks, oftentimes the shelters will have to go out and buy the socks themselves. So they have to take money out of their own budget to go and purchase this product. So inadvertently, by donating socks to this shelter, they were able to save up about $30,000 and send 2 of the kids in their community to a local college. And I never thought by setting out to donate socks that, I was just like, maybe we'll just provide some comfort to somebody, who needs it on a daily basis, that would lead to, kids going to college that I might have otherwise not been able to.
Yeah, it's very inspiring. What about the culture at your company and the organization?
Yeah, I mean, we put a ton of emphasis on company culture. We're about 130 people now, been in business for 6 years. Only 4 people have ever left the company voluntarily, and 3 of which left for, they didn't leave for other jobs. So 2 people went back to business school, 1 person moved home to be close to their family. And, when we set out, I think the benefit of having worked at a bunch of startups prior, which is where I met one of my co-founders, Randy. We actually worked together for almost 6 years at another fast growth media startup. I was able to really take learnings from what it was like to be an employee at a fast growth company, and figure out the things that I thought people either did well or the things that I thought I would, change, or how it made me feel. Lack of transparency, or lack of empowerment to kind of run my own business. And so when Randy and I set out, we said, we will never make our employees feel the way that we felt at this last company. And so almost from day one, we said that we're going to put a line in the sand that we want to create one of the best companies to work at. And I think, of course we do the things like company retreats and, parties, and on Wednesday for the company holiday party, the company holiday gift, we took everyone to Hamilton. But the mission side of our business, I think, is actually where we get a ton of value for our company culture. We have roughly between 15 to 20 giving events every month here in New York City that our employees sign up for. And within about an hour of the sign-up sheet being posted, the entire thing is full. And these are things that are not like get out of work to go, some of them are, but some of them are get up at 5:30 in the morning to go serve breakfast at a shelter, or do a midnight run program with vans in the middle of the winter, where you're out in the cold serving soup and socks to people. And so the people at our organization, I think, really, really live what we do. And I think the humility that you get by being exposed to a group of people that literally have nothing, and in such close proximity to where you live, and you have access to everything, I think really grounds them in a purpose that is bigger than simply a paycheck or trying to hit some KPI. So they come into work every day knowing that they're fighting for something because they've made relationships out in the community, and they can see the direct impact. I'm sure many of you guys have heard in your business classes, on marketing, it's all about kind of closing the loop for the customer. Similarly with our employees, we close that loop for them so that they get to see, they may be working on customer retention, but they get to see how that ultimately flows to more donations, that ultimately flows to how we get back in the local community.
Yeah. So you were telling me you've been hiring very aggressively, right? The company's been growing. Are you somewhat concerned that possibly growing the culture will be a bit diluted?
Yeah, of course. It's I think it was one of our biggest fears this year. So we started the year at around roughly 50 people, and we're about 130 now. So we brought on 80 people in the last 9 months. And I think one of the biggest surprises to me, of the 80 that we've brought on, we've let go 4, which from a hiring percentage rate is still pretty incredible. I think there's a certain degree of either we attract the right types of people, who want to be a part of something that, again, is bigger than just simply showing up to collect a paycheck. But I also think that, because we've got such a strong base, we're really good at identifying people that we think would fit in. So we put a large emphasis, not just obviously on the skill set, but on the values that we think that people live by. And that, again, I think one of the things that we did really well early on, which is very business school-y. And I went to business school and I was like, I'm never gonna use a lot of this shit, from a hard practical sense. Generally, you do.
Are my
but, like,
students in
we're
here?
not sitting there, we're not sitting there doing like SWOT analysis on a regular basis.
We don't teach that anymore.
Good. I'm dating myself. But we sat down and we went through this exercise of writing down our core values really early on. I think we were like month 3. And it was 3 people, right? It felt so silly to sit there and like, write down things that you knew internally were genuinely important to you. But from that point, it's really, they've evolved over the years, but they're still, the heart of it is very much the same. And so I think that as a guiding principle has really allowed us to say, especially in attracting talent, what are the things that is important to us, and then look for that in other people.
Mm-hmm. I have one more question on the business aspect, and then a couple of questions on career perspective, more like your life,
Sure.
and then we can open it to the audience. So many of these direct-to-consumer businesses, they start online and then they go physical, like Bonobos, Warby Parker, Casper. I'm curious if you think that may be coming for you too, or if you think you'll be purely direct-to-consumer.
Yeah, I think one of the things that, again, I think separates us from a lot of our peers, the Warbys, the Caspers, Bonobos, Glossiers, Aways, we didn't set out to build that big of a company, right? I was like, okay, we're going to build a $30 to $50 million sock business. We're going to sell it to a VF Corp, and then we're going to, move on and start the next thing. So from the beginning, we didn't raise a lot of capital. We were super focused on profitability. And because of that, I think those constraints, we only raised $4 million total, so $1 million in our seed and $3 million in our A. We were profitable every single year. The constraints of not having a ton of capital made us really focus on the one thing that we knew how to do really well, which was acquire customers online, do great storytelling, and produce great product. It snowballed, obviously, into something that was a lot bigger. And so now, now that we're knocking on the door of $200 million, we see the line of sight to how we can be a multi-billion-dollar brand. I always when people were starting out and they have like 5 million of sales, I always thought it was so ridiculous. They're sitting there being like, we're gonna be $5 billion. It's like, all right, I get it's nice to be aspirational, but there's a handful of companies that have kind of made it that large. So now that we see the line of sight to that, there's no way that we will get to be 2 billion, in the next 10 years without deep omni-channel strategy. So we're single product category. We came into this year as a single product category, mostly single channel distribution. We've got about 2% of our businesses in wholesale, mostly because a ton of demand was there. And we know that wholesale will eventually probably represent 20-30% of our business. So we wanted to do it pragmatically and think about, what can we learn from it so that we don't dilute the brand and, start to establish relationships with the right people. But as we think, as we get bigger, inevitably the growth of our core category will slow or will saturate. And so, we're looking to new product categories. So we launched t-shirts earlier this year. We launched sweatpants about a month ago. We'll be launching underwear and some other products, next year. We're looking at international markets, and then eventually looking at retail. I think the exciting thing for us when we talk about retail is similar to the way that Lululemon used retail stores as ways to kind of gather people to do yoga. We think of retail, we see a really cool opportunity is in bringing retail as a community center where we can gather our customers to go do giving events like the ones that we do as a company, or use it as a drop-off hub for people to drop off, clothing, and then also use it as an opportunity, maybe there's certain hours during the week where we invite the homeless community in to shop and pick up the items of clothing that they need the most as well. So it's on the roadmap. Again, this is kind of the practical advice that I try to give other entrepreneurs as well. When your business is growing rapidly in the core category that you're doing, continuing to double down and not get distracted by, other things. It's a hard it's hard because all these other things are super exciting, but when you're still growing at 75, 100% year over year, we're not starving for growth, right? And with growth comes complexity, so trying to minimize as much complexity as possible is important.
Yeah, no, of course, going physical will...
It's a lot. It's not easy.
Okay, since you're moving, you touched upon it, advices, right? What you would suggest. There are many people that will be graduating either this year or next year. So I'm curious, when you were thinking, when you graduated, were you more still a student or just freshly graduated? How did you think about your career? Where did you see it going? And
I really wanted to make money.
Yeah.
So, when I graduated, I was 22 and broke. So, I wanted to, I wanted to have fun at first. I don't think I was, I don't think I'd napped much out more than a couple of years. So I had done sales pretty much my whole life. And so when I graduated, I basically did some research on which industries you can make the most amount of money in sales, and so I did that. I do think that sales really, my foundation in sales, I think helped me as an entrepreneur. Whether it's selling investors, selling employees, selling customers, there's a strong aspect of selling, especially in leadership. So that was kind of where my path took me. And then I realized that, as I got a little bit more mature, I think I was 25, 26, I was like, okay, if I want to start a company, working at a big company is probably not going to give me the exposure that I need. So I joined this media company as the 7th employee. And I was fortunate enough to be there as we grew from 7 to 150, and watch, again, take lessons and cues along the way of, that was done poorly, or this was done really well. When we do this, I'm going to do it this way, and kind of crash course in kind of fast growth startup. I always say it's always nice to learn on somebody else's dime before quitting your job and then hustling, because there is always a period of time, and I think the best entrepreneurs are not the ones that write an idea on a napkin and expect to go raise $5 million immediately. I think there's a certain amount of grit and tenacity with going out and hustling it, especially I should tailor that. I realize that tech businesses, they don't generate revenue for a really long time. But if you're looking to do a service or commodity type, consumer type business, there's fundamentals of just getting out there, improving the product, improving demand before you go raise a single dollar of capital. And I think there's some of that hustle that's super important in the early days.
Is there anything you do differently from what you did, or that you've learned that was not the way? As a recommendation?
Sure.
Too much?
In 6 years, you get a lot of stuff wrong. Specifically, I think in the early days there was probably too much emphasis. I thought that planning out was really, really important. And the fact of the matter is when you have no data or no historical information to go off of, it's literally like throwing a dart at a dartboard. You could be directional, but putting emphasis on a 5-year plan when you've not sold a single product is next to impossible. And then I think the shift as we've grown to be a lot larger, I think one of the biggest challenges that I've had, especially over this last year as CEO, is getting away from the day-to-day and then removing myself and the executive team to being way more focused on the 5-year. With a bigger group of people and a lot more moving parts, it's really important for them to have a sense of where they're going, so that they can start to, back into, okay, well, if this is the 5-year, and this is the 3-year, what do we need to do next year? And from a management and leadership style, if you want to run autonomously, which I think is, you can't micromanage 130 people, and 130 will be 200, and then you have to delegate down and ultimately rely on the talent that you hire to ultimately run the tasks. That the importance of planning now is incredibly the emphasis on that is incredibly important.
So get some experience in other startups and planning would be two things.
Yeah.
And specific advice on possibly having a startup with a social impact, anything that you've learned?
Get close to it. Get really, really close to it.
Meaning?
Meaning, like, I carried socks around in my backpack, right? And it's the interactions and stories that I have and moments that I have by literally having the one-on-one interaction where I'm giving people something and seeing the reaction that they're having and the gratefulness that they have was a massive motivator. And also, like, when I go out and I speak to my employees or speak to partners, like, the genuine authenticity of the fact that, like, I'm out on the streets, meeting the community that we're serving. It also led to, when we first launched the business, we were donating the same product that we were selling. Because in my mind, I was like, okay, I don't want to treat this customer group any different from this customer group just because they're not paying for it, right? So much of the homeless community we treat as second class. They get our leftovers, they get our secondhand items, all the rest of it. And I was like, ethically or morally, it didn't feel right to treat them way differently. But it was actually in handing out socks on the street. We had gray and we had in black with all these kind of colors all over them. And a lot of times we'd get the feedback like, do you just have a solid black pair of socks? And then I called our charity partners and I was like, why do we keep getting demands just for, like, why are they so picky about it? And the truth was they were like, they want a sock that doesn't show visible wear. And so then that opened up a whole can of worms. We're like, okay, well, maybe the product that we're selling is not the best product to donate, and then we created this donation product. And so it was only through and continuing to be close to our community that really guides our mission. And so, it's easy to write a check, but to actually go and experience it, and then make your employees and anybody who's going to get involved experience it. Again, it connects them to something that's way bigger than just hitting a top line number.
So getting very, very close to the cause.
Yeah, go out and experience it for yourself, for sure.
That's a very good advice. Okay, I think we can open it to questions from the audience. I have just one last curiosity. Are you going to get any other tattoo? Do you have any open bets?
So it was my first, and I have 9 now. So it's
9?
Yeah.
Always related to Bombas?
No. I was only one related to Bombas.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, it's addictive for sure.
All right, thank you very much.
What mentality do you have in order to stay profitable every year? How did you keep costs down? How did you approach every situation even as we're growing?
Yeah, I wish I could take credit for that. Honestly, my brother was our CFO, and he was one of the co-founders. So from early days, he was an investment banker before. Having done a lot of M&A, he realized the importance of EBITDA. And I think the other thing is when we went out to raise capital, we didn't take venture money, so we weren't. I said, like, tainted by the idea of, like, top line growth is the most important thing. We'll figure out profitability later. I'd also, I think, had the benefit of, by the time we launched, we'd already had Fab, we'd already had Guilt, we already had a number of these kind of larger businesses that had raised, 70, 100 million plus million of capital, and then were significantly getting crunched. And then selling for a fraction of their last valuation. And again, if you're unfamiliar with a term called liquidation preferences, I highly recommend you educate yourself on it, because you have these founders that build these companies and raise a ton of capital, and then based on the way that the terms are structured, Guild Group was valued at $1 billion, sold for $250 million, and the founders all walked out with zero. So it's kind of crazy to me that, like, you could sell a company for $250 million that you founded, but make $0 on it. And so I think we were really focused on trying to be as self-sustainable as possible, or as early as possible. And also because we didn't have huge aspirations of building something that was super large. We knew that if we were going to build a $30 million business in 3 to 5 years, in order to get acquired by a publicly traded company or someone that was much larger from us, they all valued EBITDA because they wanted to be accretive to their business. Again, specific, I think, to consumer. Tech is an entirely different world. And so I went out and I did a lot of the research. I networked my way to the COO of G3 Apparel, and I just started asking them. I was like, how are you considering looking at businesses like Bonobos, that their last valuation was raised at like 8 times revenue? And the guy was like, I would never buy a business like that. We're valuing businesses at 2 to 3 times revenue, but mostly 10 to 15 times EBITDA. And so I was like, okay, if they're going to place importance on EBITDA, I better place importance on EBITDA. And then the methodology we then backed into from there, and we just said, okay, I don't want to play the lifetime value to CAC ratio, cost per acquisition ratio, which again got all those businesses in trouble. The Fabs, the Gilts, the Birchboxes. Everyone was just chasing the eventual dollar return on the customer that they were acquiring. And I was like, look, retail and consumer businesses have been around for 50, 60, 70, 80 years now. There's a formula, right? You buy a product for X, you sell it for Y, and you operate on the margin in between. I was like, why does an internet business have to be any different? And so I just gave the directive to our marketing people. I was like, here's the contribution margin you have to work with. I want either break even or profitability on first purchase. Go figure it out. And by putting those constraints on them, it forced us to not rely on, okay, in order to get that next incremental dollar, let's just spend more. It forced us to think about, okay, well, if we want to be more efficient and naturally the spend, the cost per acquisitions are going up, the cure to that for us was creative. And so things like that million pair video that we had out, I think has close to 150 million views online. I think we were averaging, before the video came out, I think we were averaging $38 CPAs, and for the 11 months that video ran, I think we were averaging 12. So a single piece of creative automatically reduced our CPAs by 2/3. And so that again, I think helped us realize okay, the big unlock or the big kind of antidote to rising cost per acquisition was just get really good at marketing and really good at storytelling and try to find ways to connect with the consumer rather than just rather than just throwing a bunch of dollars at it. I'm going to let you choose.
Me? Sure.
Thanks. How early did you start thinking about branding? Was it more important for you to start testing the product and getting out in the marketplace and selling, or did you think I need to have kind of a brand and image in mind before I present the product?
Yeah, I knew that again, very industry specific, and the general theme of advice that I give is whatever industry that you decide to go into, know what's important in that industry. Tech, brand's not that important, right? It's the actual technology that's really important. In consumer, I knew that we could create a really great product, but ultimately the defensibility is in brand, long term, right? I think one of the best examples is Skechers came out with Bob's shoes, right? And they donated it. It was literally ripped off the entire design, and they got slammed for it, right? Because they were it's inauthentic, and because Tom's had kind of established the brand in their space. I was super fortunate that 2 of my co-founders, Randy and this other guy, Aaron, came from agency backgrounds and had built brands before. So naturally, because of our skill set, we started thinking about brand really early on. But I also knew that the equity in a lot of our businesses is in brand. It's what people ultimately, both our consumers and an acquirer would ultimately buy. So,
Yeah. You guys have questions?
It was sort of a similar question. First off, I think the approach to growth is like super refreshing in like the wake of WeWork. Like, commend you immensely for
Thank
just
you.
like understanding that sticking to your foundation is like the most important part of building a sustainable business, and that's like actually a really valiant goal to have. On the note about building a brand, you talked about the three things: focusing on acquisition online, storytelling, and then product. And I think it's sometimes that acquisition and storytelling can come at odds to each other because acquisition is such a science. How did you guys think about kind of like balancing that focus on storytelling, building a brand online, all of that stuff?
Yeah. Again, I think because I had two co-founders that were rooted in brand, when we went out to look for a marketer, we specifically, and I think, a lot of my advice to entrepreneurs specifically focusing on this kind of world is actually the traditional way is that like your CMO would own both brand and marketing. In the digital world, the science behind acquiring customers is way more quantitative, and so the people that it ends up attracting tend to be way more quant and data, analytics rooted mindsets. And I'm sure there's some unicorns out there that like both understand brand, but then also like, live in data and science. I think by having us decouple the two, it forced a tension, right? A really like healthy, natural tension where, the example that I always give is that like, if you just followed the data, every window display that you walked by from a Nike store would have black, sneakers in it, right? And it'd be really fucking boring. And you'd walk by and be like, okay, like that's not inspiring. I'm not gonna go into that store. You walk by and it's like the rainbow, colored Flyknit, and it's like spinning around in this thing, and you're like, that is wild. Like you walk inside, like you pick it up and you're like, this is crazy. Cool, I'll take the black one. Right? But a brand marketer understands that, whereas a data marketer will just follow the data. So there's this really healthy balance between having creative separated from marketing, but also establishing a great like symbiotic relationship where marketing can say, this is what we're seeing out in the, in the marketplace where, this lay down shot or like this, tri-block, colored sock is really working well. It's converting just to site conversions overall, and then giving that data back to the creative team without much more direction other than saying like, this is what's working, and then give them the like free roam and space to say, okay, how can we iterate on this, or how can we do something new that's still somewhat in line with this, but like apply the creative and brand, ethos, and then feed it back in, see if it works, and then kind of continue the cyclical cycle of the feedback loop. Oh, daily. I mean, at our size and scale now, yeah, daily. Yeah. You had one up there. I just want to make sure people in the back get an opportunity.
Hi. Pre-college, I helped with Theory when it was just a little baby organization, and they were bringing home jackets and trousers to throw in the washer and dryer to test the fabric.
Yep.
But I know now that certain companies, certain individuals, such as Kenneth Cole, have a very strong, established policy of donating and being philanthropic. Before it was very widely popular or done or known. So I wanted to ask, such a great company as Bombas, and a really cool name, do you all foresee partnering, for example, with a Kenneth Cole type entity, that because everybody needs socks to go with their hot suits, right? So do you see that? And also this other question is, you said that you use really top quality materials like the finest merino wool. So do your wholesalers who sell to create your product, do you reach out to them to see if they would give you a sweet deal for the greatness of your service orientation? Like, are you kind of like looking also in those directions as you proceed ahead?
Sure. So the first part of the question is partnering with other organizations. I think we've looked at opportunities when it is, again, I think brand accretive. Right now, the kind of engine that we have to donate product, again, it's a 4-person team serving 3,000 charity partners. There's a focus to what they need to do. In our second year or third year of business, we were approached by The Gap to do a global campaign with them where they saw that what we were doing and then they wanted to donate socks as well. And so we did a collaboration, product collaboration with them, and they said that during this period of time that they would donate 1 million pairs of socks. And so stuff like that was super interesting, right? Because it was brand elevating for us. It got us a lot of exposure. As far as donation product is concerned, is there a future where we could manage that for other people? Maybe. Right now, we're trying to just focus on the needs of the people that we're serving. So even as we start to expand other product categories, this is a big challenge for us this year. Not with t-shirts and sweatshirts and sweatpants, which are obviously can be used, but the overwhelming response from our charity partners was actually they mostly just want socks and underwear because those are the 2 items that can't be donated. So they have a very, very short supply of socks and underwear. Meanwhile, t-shirts and sweatpants and coats and jackets and stuff, they feel like they have a fair amount of access to. But when we were thinking about like a running short, like we're not going to donate a running short, that just doesn't make sense. So our mission is constantly evolving, but again, we want to take the feedback from the community that we're serving to make sure that we're not just giving them something that fits into like an easy brand narrative. Like we're actually giving them what they need. So we're talking about evolving our giving side of our business where, maybe if we sell a jacket, maybe that equates to 6 pairs of underwear, right? Because that's more in need. The second part of your question was, yeah. So our factory partners, and then even our wholesalers, they like our mission, but at the end of the day, they still need to hit margin targets in order to operate their business. So we've built in all the margin from day one, knowing that eventually we will want our products to be in wholesale. We do get favorable. I think we get more leniency with our factories sometimes in terms of payment terms or quantity, discounts on, and particularly our donation product, which we, they know that we're not reselling that product, so they give that product to us at a much lower cost. So they do buy into it, but we don't force or expect them to take any part of it. We've built it into our core business.
Yeah.
As a certified B Corp, I'm curious how you think about the other elements besides social mission, so like the environmental sustainability.
Sure. So B Corp, for those of you that don't know, is a certification process that you go through in order to become a benefit corporation. And there's things in your bylaws and company policies from like maternity leave to equal pay and time off and all these things. I think there's something like 300 or 400 items that you have to check. Again, ranging the entire way of the business. Sustainability specifically, this has been a challenging one for us because ethically and morally, we want to do the things that are right. But when you're a small, fast-growing business, you can choose to only do so many things at the same time. Otherwise, your operating margin gets super compressed. So for us, I think it's about, look, when we choose factory partners, we make sure that they're vetted enough that they're not dumping toxic waste into the local water supply. But could we use less plastic in the poly bags that we ship? Sure. Can we find more carbon neutral ways to get our product from our customer, from our warehouse to our customer? Sure. Could we find factories that use more solar than traditional energy sources? Sure. A lot of those things take time, resources, and money. And so for us, right now, and we get a lot of pressure from internally from our employees. They're like, why do we keep doing polybags and all this stuff? And I'm like, well, because there's a risk that if the box ever gets wet and the product gets wet, then we have to throw all the product out. So like, there are reasons that they do it the way that they do it. Could we get better? 100%. But I think for us, we're just about to hire our first sustainability person. But he's relatively junior. It's like a director level role. But now I think for us, knowing that we're now at a point where we're profitable and the path forward is actually one where we're starting to generate a ton of cash, now we can divert some of that cash into longer term plans that will, may not have an immediate ROI today on the business, but if we can be considered, in the ilks of, Patagonia in time, that would be obviously a huge win for us. But these things take a lot of time and energy. It's not just flipping a light switch and being like, great, we're now sustainable. And like, it's like, what is sustainable, right? Like, there's so many areas throughout all the entire supply chain that you'd look at and be like, well, that's not sustainable. Even companies that claim to be sustainable. There's so many varying degrees. So it's something that we're always like thinking about, but I think we have to set longer term goals in terms of like what actually is important to us. We say the same thing about diversity and inclusion. I mean, we started, when I looked at, our, mix of employees based on not just race, but gender and, educational backgrounds and all these things. I mean, we get a ton of pressure internally from our staff being like, we've got to invest more in diversity and inclusion, And again, it's a slow moving ship, right? I can't, you don't want to say like, okay, well, the next 10 hires are going to be Black or Hispanic or disabled or gay or like, these are systemic changes that you have to like really work at over time. And I'm having to say like, now 73% of our workforce is female. I think 8% of our workforce is Black. Knowing that the population is 13%, we're starting to like move there. We got to start to set goals and slowly move towards them. And you've got to be honest about it. I think that's the other thing too. You just have to be really open and transparent and say like, yeah, these are the things that we don't do well and we can improve on, and these are the things that we do really, really well, and here's how we're going to get to continue to improve all these things around the board.
I think I should add, it's quite obvious that marketing played a huge role, and still does for you, but I was wondering if you employed like a PR firm in your early days to kind of like competitive consumer attention, and like if you're now as you're coming to communities to grow.
Yeah, PR, I've got an interesting take on PR. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, and I think more junior, entrepreneurs, people who've never really had much exposure to business, the amount of times that I've heard like, well, we just got to get our product, on the Today Show, or we got to get our product on, on so-and-so's Instagram or whatever, and that'll be huge. And my friend knows somebody that knows somebody that, is somewhat connected to one of these people. And the truth of the matter is PR is a total hit or miss type of game. When I was building the business, I said, I'd rather take the dollars and invest them into things that I knew I was going to get a return, or I knew I was going to learn something tangible. So if I was going to spend $5,000 a month on a PR agency, I'd rather spend $5,000 a month on a new marketing channel and see if that channel was viable or not, and then move to the next channel where I knew that if I spent $5,000, I was gonna get $10,000 back, guaranteed, over and over and over and over again, so I could create that annuity. There's a certain point, where again, you start to generate enough cash for the business where you're like, okay, $70,000, $100,000, $200,000 a year for the like option of, yeah, maybe they'll get us on something, and the exposure there starts to become worth it. But super early days, like, unless PR to me is like, you treat it like gambling, right? Like, you don't sit down at a craps table and put down any money that you don't feel like, if I lose this and walk away, like, it's fine. And that's the same way I feel like with PR. Like, you have to go into it knowing that like, I don't expect a return. If I get one, great. But like, I'm not gonna build part of my business on something that's so unpredictable.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
I got to make it a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah? Sure.
I'm just curious about, you've heard a lot about the successes of Bombas, but can you talk a little about a time where like, oh shit, like we may flop here? Is there anything that...
Yeah, I can think of two. One was the one that was like really like where there's a ton of uncertainty. So in our third or fourth year, I think we were at a point where 80% of our marketing spend was on Facebook. And there was this 2-month period in July and August of that year where Facebook was playing around with the algorithm on their on the marketing on the auction side of their business, and CPAs like quadrupled. Like we were like a $25 CPA, and then all of a sudden like consistently it was 100, and we're just like we're screwed. Like if this is the new norm for us, like this business will never be able to work, and we hadn't had enough cash or time to start to diversify into other marketing channels. And so that was a major oh shit moment of like, we can't be so reliant on like one partner, especially one partner that, you know, we were a like speck of dust to them. They didn't like know who we were. They didn't care about us. And really had the control in like a matter of minutes to like determine the successful outcome of our business. Whereas like you have one partner in, you know, kind of Nordstrom's, the likelihood of Nordstrom's like going out of business the next month is pretty low. But for us, that was a massive lesson in diversification. And then the other kind of oh shit moment was, I mean, it was less of like, we're going to go out of business, but it was a major shock to the system is last year we underprojected holiday sales by 30%. And again, because we were, the flip side of being focused on efficiency is that you try to like tighten the belt as much as possible all the way around. And at our warehouse, you know, we'd given them our conservative projections versus the high case of our projections. And naturally, when we beat our high case by another 15%, the warehouse just crumbled. There was, you know, about 5% of orders, which was a lot, were going out with either errors or being delayed. And it ended up costing us about $3.5 million because we had to refund $1.5 million of our customers' orders because we just couldn't reply to them. Even though they ended up getting them, we couldn't guarantee that they were accurate, and we didn't have enough manpower from a customer service standpoint to like actually deal with the issue. So we just like blanket split, like everyone's getting a refund, and then we gave them a gift card to come back because we knew that, again, the cost of acquiring customers was just so expensive that we couldn't risk losing that cohort of customers either.
Very interesting. All right.
Okay. Yes, thank you so much, Professor Bellezza, and for David. This was a fascinating conversation. I also just wanted to quickly acknowledge that we actually have one of Bombas' charity partners in the room, back on my feet, and they actually helped facilitate this conversation. And in the spirit of Bombas, we are actually doing a volunteer event with them next Monday, where we'll be preparing interview bags for their homeless population that they work with to get back in the Next Steps program. So thank you.
If there's any runners in the room, they're always looking for running volunteers. It's an amazing...
Deb and I have talked.
Organization. They help transition people out of homelessness through the discipline of running. So they go to different shelters every 3 times a week and run. And you know, it was so inspiring for me. We've been working together for 5 years now. I met a bunch of these runners who 9 months prior couldn't walk a city block, and then when they were running the New York City Marathon. So it's a really, really incredible organization. So.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody.